Welcome to A.U.M. Ask Us Marketing. I'm your host, Callie Fedesinko of Callie Collective, a digital marketing agency designed to build relationships between financial advisors and their target audience through data-driven content, websites, and advertising. Our episode today is brought to you by the Financial Planning Association, otherwise known as the FPA. FPA has some great resources for advisors like you. They can connect you to other advisors, as well as providing different tutorials and data to help you take control of your firm. So, a couple Mondays ago, we heard from Tim Goodwin about how instrumental Google reviews have been to his business growth. In fact, if you remember, he said he would rather have a testimonial over a referral. So today we're talking with Andrew Johnson from Testimonial IQ about how you can implement testimonials as a whole into your practice. So join me and welcome Andrew. So glad to have you. I'm also doing something a little new, audience. If you'll notice to the right of your screen, if you write your comments, they are just gonna show up right there. Anyways, welcome, Andrew.
Thanks, Callie. Thanks for having me.
So excited. Okay, so we've got this new SEC rule that allows testimonials, but what I found is a lot of advisors, firms, custodians are hesitant to start using them over the fear of doing it wrong and getting in trouble, which I totally get. But this is what led you to create Testimonial IQ, right?
Yeah, that's exactly it. When leading up to the new marketing rule, when it was in review and getting feedback, you heard all this content, this almost panic around it, right? This is going to change everything. There's testimonials, endorsements, there's performance data, and firms were kind of, and pundits were saying all this about how are we going to keep up. And then the rule went into effect and it was crickets, right? I mean, Here we are a year and a half later, and there's around 10% of firms taking advantage of it. And so, when I spoke with a lot of the marketers, and particularly the compliance officers, what you said is exactly right. It was, we want to do this, but the rule's 400 some pages long and it's complex and we can't afford to make a mistake. So, the idea behind Testimonial IQ was to make a software platform that created a framework that made it less confusing, less intimidating, and easier to do.
I mean, that's amazing. What does it actually do? I was about to say do.
We like to think that it gives advisors, marketers, and compliance officers the ability to use testimonials in a crawl, walk, run approach. And what I mean by that is it's a white labeled platform where they can collect feedback from clients. If they want to crawl, they can use it to collect feedback. That's it. They're learning more about their client experience. If they want to start walking, there's tools to embed that feedback directly onto their website. So you can build social proof for people who visit you there. And there's compliance workflows associated. So they have oversight, it embeds required disclosures, it stores all your records. And then finally, as firms get more comfortable, there's the ability to enable clients to leave that same content in the form of Google reviews, which is obviously massive in terms of SEO benefits, social proof. You heard Tim talk about what it's done for his business.
Yeah.
We've seen that over and over again in the firms that we've spoken with that have taken advantage of it.
So something that we talk about a lot at Callie Collective is the importance of your website and your email list, because these are assets that you own and you can maintain control over. Unlike social media platforms like Google Business or LinkedIn Business, you can't control the other content that your audience is shown. And they have that ability that they can just shut down your profile. And then you can't contact anybody, of course. Like, where's the help button? There is none.
There is none.
So while Google Business is very important to SEO, tremendous, right? And advisors like Tim have seen great success, there is more of a risk of losing the work you've put in if it's on Google. Is that risk removed if someone's using Testimonial IQ? Like, are the testimonials saved in Testimonial IQ?
They are, but before I talk about that, I think it's important. The reason we chose Google as a platform is a few reasons. I mean, one, Google is home of more than 70% of all the reviews on the internet, and it's where the 90% of all searches start. So it's the first thing before a client ever gets to your website or a prospect gets to your website, they see what Google shows them, and your Google business profile is a part of that. Given Google's scope and whether we like it or not, monopoly on that industry, Google's not going away. There are a number of different sites that are popping up that allow you to host testimonials. Those could go away at any time, but Google's not going to go anywhere. But you're right. Our platform, you own all the content. So before it goes to Google, it first comes to the advisor. They're getting client permission to use it in marketing. They store that, and they can download that at any time. So even if something were to happen to their Google business profile and Google, accidentally shut it off, or their firm decided they had to shut it off, they'd still have all that content from clients. They'd have a record of their client permission to use it in marketing, and they'd be able to use it however their team determines appropriate.
Okay. So how do you get it on Google review from Testimonial IQ?
So we don't. And what's really important is that the client does that, right? I mean, everything posted to Google has to be from the client. They've got to be logged into their Google business profile. And in order to maintain a compliant process, it all has to be something that the client is controlling. They have the opportunity to write, whether it's positive or negative feedback, they all get that same opportunity, which is something that's as interesting because it seems to freak some advisors out, right? Like, someone might write something bad about me on Google. Well, maybe, but you're managing this person's life savings and they haven't left you. And so generally the feedback is very, very positive. And we actually just the other week published some data on Kitz's, which showed that sure enough, advisors have a much higher average Google review rating than other industries. Their clients really do tend to love them. It's just that if you don't ask for feedback, you don't get it.
Right. How do you incorporate the compliance aspects?
Yeah. So compliance is built into every element of our platform. We really think of it more as a compliance software than a marketing software. So every time you build a feedback request in the platform, which is, it's branded, it's customized for the advisor, that gets reviewed by your compliance team before it can go out. And that can be an internal compliance officer, an outsourced consultant. Either way is fine. There's records of that stored. So now you're controlling how you're asking for feedback. You can control the feedback form, the email you're sending, all of that. The emails are coming from the advisor. You're able to control whatever terms and conditions or privacy policies you need your clients to agree to and store a record of that in the platform. And then ultimately, firms also have control over whether or not they're encouraging that redirect to Google as well. So firms that aren't quite ready for that can shut that off.
Gotcha. Let's talk about, in general, a little bit, testimonials apart from the Google review. You had mentioned in a recent article that testimonials and advertisements must include 3 clear and prominent disclosures. But before we even get to the disclosures, what constitutes as an ad? Because I know that it's not just actual advertising.
Yeah, no, it's important. And, it's a convoluted definition in the rule. But at the end of the day, it's any communication from the advisor soliciting new clients or additional business from current clients.
Okay.
And it's important because that can happen in ways that an advisor might not think about it. And obviously, if you're putting out a billboard, that's an advertisement. If you're putting content on your website, that's an advertisement. In the context of testimonials, though, I think what advisors need to think through, particularly if they are doing Google reviews, is if you are reviewing content before a client puts out that testimonial, or you're giving clients content that you want them to then share as a testimonial, the SEC is still going to say, hey, that's a communication from you, the advisor, so we're going to view that as an advertisement.
Okay. So what are the disclosures needed?
Yep. So 3 clear and prominent, whether or not the testimonials from a current client, whether or not they were compensated, and whether or not there are any conflicts of interest. And so conflicts of interest would be something like, hey, is the person living at your brother-in-law, right? Or, a sibling, someone that would have a reason, even if they're a current client, to sort of say really nice things about you.
Okay.
Compensation is pretty straightforward. And then, current client, obviously it makes sense to solicit testimonials only from people familiar with your services.
So there's this rule that you can't spend more than $100 on like gifts for your clients. Is that like, if you're giving Christmas gifts, does that need to be considered as compensation?
So it's definitely something, one, they should all talk with their compliance officers about.
Okay.
And there's a de minimis threshold, which triggers whether it needs to be recorded. But one really important caveat is if you are doing testimonials,
Mhm.
any sort of compensation you provide turns that testimonial into an advertisement.
Hmm.
The de minimis threshold doesn't apply there. So if some firms, if they were to say, hey, we want to do a bunch of Google reviews, let's offer our clients, a $10 Starbucks gift card to leave us one.
Mhm.
Even that $10 gift card is compensation, and
Hmm.
that's mean that's an advertisement. So really important for firms to, put all of their processes
Yeah.
related to testimonials into their policies and procedures, and then actually read and understand them before they do it.
Hmm. What about clear and prominent? There used to be, I don't know if it's still a rule, but it had to be at least 8-point font in disclosures, or maybe it
Oh,
could be
yeah.
bigger.
Yeah, that's I don't know. I haven't seen anything related to the font size. It makes sense, but what it does say is it has to be at least as clear and prominent as the ad itself,
Mm,
contained within the four corners of the ad. And I think where
okay.
that gets most applicable is I see a lot of advisors who will have a testimonial section on their website, which is great as long as they're doing it correctly. But then they'll have these, disclosures way down at the footer, as some
Mhm.
sort of footnote. And, that's certainly not within the bounds of the advertisement. So you definitely want to make sure that anytime a client is reading your testimonial, they
Yeah.
get those disclosures associated as well.
Okay. Good to know. All right. You're apparently a prolific writer because in another recent article, you mentioned that there are 5 questions to answer to create an effective and compliant testimonial process. And I'd love to go over those.
Yeah.
Um, so, number 1 was who will request the client feedback? What will the timing of the request be? And how will you ensure that the process isn't biased? What do you mean by the process isn't biased?
Yeah. So the SEC wrote the marketing rule, and even part of the purpose was press release with one investors, right? They recognize the words services have changed, that having access to reviews and user generated content is now critical in decision making. But the reason they held off for so long in testimonials is that they were afraid to be used, right? Advisors would compensate people or pick their favorite 10 clients and get information out there that would be very powerful, that would sway potential investors, but would be biased information. And so when you think about, how you're going to ask feedback and how you're going to request feedback from clients, how often you're going to do it, who you're going to request it from, you have to consider that element of the rule, right? The whole purpose is to provide more transparent and correct information to prospective investors. And so while most businesses, if you're a dentist's office or a restaurant, your goal is to go find all your happy clients and say, write me a review.
Right.
For advisors, they need to think about it in terms of how am I going to get a representative sample, right? Or an authentic sample of the client experience in my testimonials.
Okay. And then number 2 was how will you obtain and store clients' permission to use their testimonials in marketing? What if you didn't ask permission and the client just wrote a review on Google?
Yeah. So, that happens all the time. And we've talked
Yeah.
to a number of advisors have this great thing on Google. The problem is if that happens, if you ever directly reference your Google listing, that's going to be considered adoption, very likely. Adoption is going to turn that to an advertisement. So most businesses, again, they just point to their Google business profiles, they check out our rating. But if an advisor does that, they're adopting the content. It's an advertisement. It needs to have those disclosures we just talked about.
Okay.
So if it's a one-off, one way they can do it is they can reach out to that client and say, I saw what you wrote. Do I have your permission to use it in marketing? By the way, will use your name, won't use your name. This is how it'll be anonymized. So if it's a one-off, you can do that. But if, at scale, we talked to a number of advisors who they either do feedback surveys or they just get a lot of unsolicited, compliments from clients, right? Which means if you want to start using that content, you need to have a way where you're getting their permission to use it in marketing, and you can have a record of that. So when the SEC comes in and says, hey, tell me about your testimonial process, you can point to, hey, this is, how I requested feedback. This is, this is them saying, yep, I recognize that you might use that in marketing, things like that.
Okay. And then number 3, once testimonials have been received, how will you determine which ones to display and which ones might be inappropriate? So first, I thought that you had to display all the testimonials to be compliant. And also, what would an inappropriate comment be?
Yeah. So, one, you don't have to display all of them,
Mhm.
but what the SEC does say is that you need to display what they call a representative sample. I
Okay.
don't know anyone that wants to be involved in determining what a representative sample
Right.
is. So we always recommend just use all the ones that are appropriate for
Okay.
marketing, right? They say specifically, hey, you don't have to show an equal number of good or negative ones, but it has to be representative.
Hmm.
Now, in
Good
terms of,
luck.
yeah, right. So exactly, just use all the ones that are appropriate. Now, when I say appropriate, if you're using testimonials on your website or in a newsletter, right? We just talked about what an advertisement is. That's an
Mhm.
advertisement. And so just because you're using these third-party comments in there doesn't suddenly free you from all the constraints of an advertisement.
Okay.
So if someone wrote performance results, right? Hey,
Mhm.
I love working with Callie because she tripled my portfolio last year.
Right.
Suddenly you've got, unsubstantiated performance results that don't have the right, caveats or fees built in. And so that's something that advisory firms would very likely want to filter out, right?
Mhm.
Or I've never seen this happen, but if you had PII or vulgarity or obscenity, right? They're still
Right.
allowed to have objective criteria for what they want inside their advertisements. But
Not that anyone's going to do this, but let's just say it happens. What if your competitor goes on there and writes a really nasty review and you're like, this isn't my client. Can you take it down?
you mean on Google specifically?
Yeah.
You can try. It's very, very hard.
Okay.
Google doesn't have an option. I mean, and it makes sense, but Google doesn't have an option for you just to take down reviews you don't like. And they intentionally make it very hard to take down negative reviews. And
Hmm.
so simply saying, hey, I don't like this review, take it down, they're never going to listen
Sure.
to you, right? You generally need to be able to have some sort of proof that
Hmm.
person wasn't a client or that it was malicious, argue that it's libelous, and then you can make a case. But from everything I've heard, it's very challenging to do that, which is why the best thing you can do is try to drown those out with a
Hmm.
true steady stream of representative, reviews. I talked to one advisor recently who one of their junior advisors posted something about a collegiate football team on Twitter, and
Yeah.
suddenly they got this stream of negative Google reviews from
Oh my gosh.
Penn State fans, right? And so, but Google is very challenging to work with, and it's unfortunate, and I understand the frustration there. Even more reason to get true reviews in, but then
Right.
say, oh well, that just means I won't do Google reviews. The problem is if you don't do it, they're still there, right? People can
Yeah.
still write a negative review on your Google Business profile, even if you never claim it, they can do that. So
Yeah.
proactive strategy really is the best defense.
Wow. That's so crazy that happened. But um as far as replying, so like, okay, let's say you get some negative and you want to reply to them. If I reply to a negative review, do I also now have to reply to all reviews?
Yeah, it's something I think everyone's still waiting for a little bit of guidance from the SEC on in terms of how they're going to enforce that.
Yeah.
All the recommendations we've gotten from a very conservative standpoint is don't reply to things on Google. The big risk is adoption of content. If you start,
Okay.
if something you do is considered adoption, suddenly that Google Business profile could be considered an advertisement. Then you've got to have
Mm.
oversight of the content, which you can't because you can't take things down. You've got to have disclosures associated, which you can put them at the top of your profile, but I don't know if that's going to cut it or not. So
Hmm.
the most conservative advice I've heard is, hey, if you get content on Google, whether it's good or bad, reach out to the person directly, either thank them or see if there's something you can do to resolve their issue.
Yeah. I'm gonna be honest. I don't remember if I stopped at number 3 or number 4. I think I was at 3. So number 4 is, how will that content ultimately be approved? And I don't think I said this yet because my question was approved by who?
Yeah. So again, and this is by your compliance team, right? So we talked
Okay.
about if you're sharing content on your website, even if it's a testimonial a client wrote, and you can prove they wrote that, once you put it on your site, it's still an advertisement. And so
Mm.
you need some objective process to determine what you can display and what you can't,
Yeah.
particularly because you don't want to be accused of cherry picking during examinations. So if you
Mm.
have some set of objective criteria, if this is how we're going to prove the content, the testimonials we use, and have a record of that. Then when examination time comes, you can show, hey, this is all the testimonials I received. These are the
Yeah.
criteria we used to evaluate them, and this is why we filtered out these three.
Okay. Oh shoot, you said something and they triggered a question, and then I got distracted. So we'll just go to number 5. How will you document the entire process to demonstrate compliance in the event of an examination? And what do you suggest?
Well, I mean, I'm biased, but our software. um, Although I do tell firms, hey, listen, if you want to put 2 or 3 testimonials in the bottom of your site and never do anything else again, it won't be that effective. But look, just email your clients, ask for feedback, ask for permission to use it in marketing, store those emails somewhere, store the criteria used to evaluate them, make sure you've got the disclosures embedded. If you're doing this at scale, though, right, and it's a process, which is how you really reap the best benefits from SEO, then you need to make sure you have some system, some record in place. So when exam time comes, it's not good enough to have an unbiased process. You have to be able to show everyone that your process is unbiased. So you want to make sure you can show that record of, hey, this is who I asked for feedback, how I asked them, what they shared, why I either did or didn't include it in my marketing going forward.
I remember the question that I had for you. And it was, have you seen any advisors get in trouble? And if they have, what are they getting in trouble over?
Personally, I haven't seen any advisors get in trouble. Anecdotally, what I've heard from talking to some current and former examiners is that it's been for pretty glaring things, right? So performance results were one of the big focuses of the first round of sweeps related to, are you cherry picking the timeline for the results? Do you have the right disclosures?
Yeah.
And when it comes to testimonials and endorsements, it was, unfortunately, there's still a lot of firms out there who are putting testimonials on their site and have zero disclosures associated, right? And so it's so far what I've seen is some of the really basic things.
Yeah. What about videos? Okay, so we've got testimonials, but you're not allowed to cherry pick. And correct me if I have this right. It's not an ad until you start like promoting the review. So I'm going to say once you get to the video, it would be it's an ad. How do you not cherry pick? Because you have to ask specific people if they'll do a video.
Which is why, one, I think the most reasonable interpretation of the rule is going to be, hey, there's no way we have 100 clients. There's no way we're going to have 100 video testimonials on our site. Right. And I think making sure that your disclosures that accompany that are referencing the fact that, hey, this isn't going to be this is a single client testimonial. It doesn't mean it's be necessarily representative of the entire client experience. It's also why I think having a comprehensive strategy of written testimonials to accompany a video is a great safety net, right? Of saying, hey, here's some video testimonials, by the way, which are incredibly powerful. And I think more firms need to be doing these. Which are incredibly powerful. And then I think it's great to be able to say, and here's a link to all the feedback we've received from clients, right? And have a testimonials page, have a big wall of love. And that way you can point to that and say, and show that, hey, we're, yes, we have some video testimonials from super enthusiastic clients. Here's everything else we've received as well.
What about other platforms? Because people can leave reviews everywhere. LinkedIn, it used to be you wanted to get reviews there. Now I feel like Google is more of a focus, which I think it should be. But if you have a review on Google and LinkedIn and Facebook, what do you suggest? Like, does your software aggregate all of that?
We enable advisors, if they want to pull reviews from all those platforms and put them through, our compliance process, or if they want to use them in their own marketing. But we're really focused on Google for a few reasons. One, like I talked about earlier, it's where 90% of searches start. It's the first thing people see. It dominates local search. And having reviews on Google is the best thing you can do to pop up there, right? It's more impactful than having LinkedIn reviews or Facebook reviews or anything else.
Right.
The second is, the second largest review site is Yelp. But Yelp, it's against their terms of service to ask clients to leave you reviews. So it's something where if they come, it's great, but you can't. So Google's a great place to be able to have that proactive strategy.
Okay. That's interesting about Yelp. I guess I think of Yelp associated with restaurants, not really with advisors, but I didn't know that you couldn't ask. All right. So as we're closing out our time, I want to ask you 2 questions.
Okay.
First one is, what's the risk in gathering testimonials? And the second one is, what's the potential reward?
Yeah. So, I think the biggest risk is obviously are compliance related. We see a number, not too many, but a number of firms who, sort of hear, oh, I can do testimonials. And then they stop there and then just start going out and, grabbing feedback from clients and slapping on their website, no disclosures, no process. Or even worse, heard of a couple anecdotes of firms that'll, give gift cards for reviews and things like that. And so, not spending time to read the rule. It's pain and it's a dense rule, but like read the rule, have a discussion with marketing and build a process around it first before you ask for any feedback from clients. Make sure your Form ADV is updated to reflect use testimonials. Make sure your policies and procedures have something in them about how you do it, and then make sure your team is trained on it. So it does require upfront work and investment to do it correctly.
Yeah.
But the reward is, it's an amazing opportunity for financial advisors right now, particularly when you look at Google, because no one's been doing this for 70 years, right? No one's been doing it since Google was around, certainly. And so it takes so few to stand out. If you're a local restaurant, you need to build up hundreds of reviews to start standing out in search. If you're a financial advisor, it's like 5 to 10 in most.
Yeah, right.
And so it's this amazing, greenfield opportunity. And when we talk to the firms who've done it well, and we work with a couple that have, 50, 60, or even over 100 reviews, they tell us, sort of like Tim said, right? Like, I'd rather have reviews than referrals.
Yeah.
They last forever. And they have a number of clients coming to them say, hey, I was choosing between you and firm X, and couldn't find anything about firm X, but I found so much about you. And so it's just an amazing opportunity to stand out right now.
Yeah. So great. And I can attest to the Google reviews being instrumental in SEO. I mean, just first of all, claiming a Google business listing is huge, and so many people don't do it. I think because compliance used to say you can't, but just that one thing, just claiming the business is
update your hours.
Yes.
Yeah.
Anything you can update it. And then those reviews definitely helps with the ranking. This was really helpful. Oh, I did have, if everything that you've listed out on best practices, is that available on your website?
We share a lot of it in our blog section. And then for any firms that are interested, we also actually have a draft policies and procedures template related to specifically the use of testimonials with highlighted sections on what they should update for their firm. Yeah. So if anyone's interested, they can reach out to me, Andrew at testimonialiq.com, and we're happy to send them over that for free.
Oh, love that. I might ask you for that myself.
I'll send it over right afterwards.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Andrew. This was very informative.
Thanks. Had a great time.
All right. So thank you everyone for joining us. And if you're interested, we do have an email that goes out every week. I've obviously got it posted all over the screen right now, so you have multiple places to scan. We release tips, tricks, and trade secrets every Thursday. If you haven't guessed, we also like alliteration at Cali Collective. So we've got Ask Us Marketing live at lunch, tips, tricks, and trade secrets on Thursday. So alliteration's my thing. And then, of course, join us next Monday. We'll be talking with Sarah from Favorite Daughter Media about how you can be a good podcast guest and grow your business from your podcast appearances. So make sure to join us then. And until then, have a great week and a great weekend off for July 4th.